Hello and welcome back to the Week 11 NFL DFS Slate Breakdown. I'm your host, Tyler Weeman, and I will be breaking down the slate. At FlatTyler83 are my DFS names, and now let's get into the old show. As always, though, before we get into it, come join us at LineStar. We do have a 7-day free trial through the app stores, Android or iOS app store. If you've never tried us out before, download us that, and it does give you access to the websites, the apps, all the props, all the DFS, all tools for all sports we cover. Now, if you want a different cheap way to come join us, we do have these promo offers here on our pricing page. Parlay Play, Sleeper, Underdog, Chalkboard. If you are a new customer to any of them, you can get one free month. Just go follow the directions here, go through our codes. LineStar is the promo code for all of them. Now let's jump in to this big boy slate. We got 12 games on FanDuel. We got 11 games on DraftKings. As always, start with a little overview of the full slate. So Baltimore and Steelers, 48.5 game total. This one is super interesting to me. One being the Steelers versus Ravens are usually some, slugfest, low scoring. 29 points is the high game total over the last few years. But this Pittsburgh offense is rolling. They've scored 26 plus in 3 games with Wilson starting. The Ravens offense has just been an absolute juggernaut this year. So this one is very interesting and a huge range of variance in it. Then we got the Jags and the Lions. Lions are 13.5 point favorites. So they are going to score a ton of points. It's almost likely. But it's just a very weird spot for the DFS on that. And we will get into some Lions plays, I am sure. Then Seattle versus 49ers, 48-point game total, 6.5 point spread. And then lastly, the Bengals and the Chargers at 48. All of those we definitely need to consider players from. And then some others that we do are the fastest games of the week. Cleveland, the Browns versus the Saints, only a 44-point total, but it is the fastest game of the week by a decent margin, especially with Jameis at the helm because they've thrown over 40 passes in back-to-back games with Jameis. Next, we got Atlanta at Denver. Not one you would think, but hey, we do have a 45-point total there, and it's only 3 lower than the highest. So there's definitely a range of outcome there that works, similar to the Browns and the Saints. And then lastly, Chicago and Green Bay. But that is a 40-point total. Not the prettiest spot, but Green Bay likely does come with the victory there. And let's get into the slate as a whole now. All right. Starting with quarterback, we got Justin Herbert, 15% owned, 7,300. And I think this is an interesting spot for him. I think Harbaugh will realize the Bengals are going to come out and try to be a little bit aggressive. And with that, maybe he starts a little more aggressive. We have seen them get a little bit more pass heavy, 34, 39, 32. Then 2 easy wins, and well, I shouldn't say easy wins, but they won by decent margins. That fell off again. So I would expect Herbert to throw mid-30s, maybe if the game gets wild into the 40s, but it definitely makes Herbert useful. Now, the thing that I think is interesting, I think McConkey goes the highest owned as far as a stack partner with Herbert, but I would much prefer Palmer or Johnston because they get deeper down the field, and the Bengals been very good versus the slot. Next, Aaron Rodgers, 7,100, 14% owned. I have a hard time getting on board with this one. I just don't think there is much ceiling in the play. And there's also risk. He just put up only 4 versus Arizona. Also has had a 10, a 12, 15s. I am out on the Aaron Rodgers play. I don't mind either getting Adams or Wilson in my lineup because those two are going to probably be 65% of the target share, and you can get most of Aaron Rodgers' points through them. So I'm out on Rodgers. Next, we got Josh Allen. This is the first chalky guy that I'm really considering. I don't mind a little bit of Herbert, but probably not going to go too hard on him. Josh Allen, I'm probably going to have a little bit. It is a very tough spot versus Kansas City, but the Bills are in the running for, you know, having the best division or best record in the conference. With that could come be the first round bye. And because of that, I think there is a chance that the Bills let Josh Allen be Josh Allen and just try and take over a game. What that means when it comes down to the red zone area, it's going to be Josh Allen running. It's not going to be Cook. It's going to be the ball in Allen's hand a ton if the game stays close, which most likely it does. KC has been in all close games and really are very close to being like 6-3. You know, they beat the Ravens by a toe. They beat the Broncos by a blocked kick. They've had a couple fluky finishes that have just gone their way. And the Bills could absolutely win this game. You know, they win it. They're 9-2, and KC is 9-1, and there's a 1-game difference. They have the tiebreaker. This is a big one for Buffalo, and with that, I think there's the path for Josh Allen rushing a little bit more, for Josh Allen rushing TDs, and then that unlocks his ceiling. Also, with Josh Allen, one of the main issues with him as far as a DFS and stacking situation is that he spreads the ball around. He's had 4 or 5 guys to throw it to. Now there's no Kincaid, there's no Coleman, Cooper is still questionable, and so that target tree is shrank a little bit. I'm interested in Allen. My only issue is that KC is a very tough defense. If we look what he's been able to do against KC, though, 2023, 31, you know, that's solid defense. 22 also, 26 in 2022. He has been able to beat a good defense before. It wouldn't be the first time. I don't mind going some Allen. Now, let's get, I want to talk to Bo Nix while we're still talking about chalky guys. Bo Nix is getting some love, and I do like me some Bo Nix in this spot. I'm fine to have some. I just don't think he should be going as high owned as he is. He does give you some rushing upside. Cortland Sutton's been very good for him. So you have one solid stacking partner. And then you got some other guys, you know, that you can throw into that mix. They haven't really been able to run the ball. Falcons are kind of a pass funnel. There's a lot of reasons to like Bo Nix. I don't mind having some, but I'm not going to go super hard on him at these type of ownerships. Brock Purdy is another one I don't mind. He's been getting there every single week. My issue is just low pass volume. He got to 36 last week and about as good of a matchup as you get. I just don't think that he's going to really push that, high 30s pass attempts or maybe even 40s. He's going to be more in that 30, low 30s area, and it's just hard to create a winning score off of that. Could it happen? Yes. It just has to be super efficient. And I kind of just like going the other way with Geno as the quarterback instead of Brock, and then having some 49er bringbacks, because you could always do CMC or Debo. All right, now pivot time. Lamar Jackson, 9% owned. He's 9K. This Steelers game I like. I just realized I didn't like Russell Wilson. I do mean to, so we will talk about him next. But I think this game is very interesting. I talked about it in the intro a little bit. It has a super wide range of outcomes. It could be the typical slugfest game like we see from the Ravens if you look. So there was one game of 24-20. Oh, well, those are 2022. anyways, Lamar, this is all Lamar. He hasn't played Pitt much. But when Lamar has played Pittsburgh, when Pittsburgh has played the Steelers, it is Ravens have played the Steelers. Man, I got all mixed up there. Over the last 2 years, there's been 29 game total as the high. Lamar hasn't played in all of those. So there is a little bit of a issue with that. But when he has, you got to go back to 2020 to see big scores. That's 24-28, 26-23. The last few years, it's all been slugfest, low-scoring games. Now, these two teams are different right now. This Ravens offense has been insane. They're scoring 30-plus pretty much weekly. Their 3 losses, they were 24 or lower. But not only that, their defense is making people throw. So, and they're not great stopping that pass, the pass attempt. So there's been just shootouts after shootout going through the Ravens, and I think it's a very interesting spot. Don't mind some Lamar, but I'm a little more interested in Russell Wilson, 7,800. Look, 37, 26, and 28 are the 3 totals that Wilson's and the Steelers offense have put up. Washington, they just had put up 28. They have been a very solid D. Put up 26 versus the Giants. That's the highest the Giants have given up. 37 versus the Jets. They've been rolling a little bit, and now you got a Baltimore defense that has been giving up points and allowing big pass plays. And the thing that Russell does well is get the ball down the field well. So I'm a little interested in this spot. It could end up just being a smash mouth game. We know Arthur Smith is most likely to try and run the ball. I think that's probably the best chance for the Steelers to win, is them being able to run the ball, take a little more time off the clock, and win that way. So if that's working, maybe there's a little less chance of this game really blowing out, or blowing up, I should say. But I think there is a path to big-time success. And if Russell Wilson really goes, I would almost guarantee it that it's Pickens that has the big game. Now, there's still other people you can throw into that stack if you want, but Wilson's definitely an interesting one. All right, this one's a bit ugly, but he's only 6,400. Anthony Richardson. The Jets haven't been able to stop anybody since Saleh was fired. Maybe he learned a little bit over the last 2 weeks with Flacco and, just watching how he prepares. And maybe Steichen makes his game plan around AR and lets him loose, lets him run, doesn't try to make him be a pocket passer. If he is able to run and let it go, there's big time ceiling. We saw, last year in his few games, he was able to score at the goal line a bunch, get rushing TDs, have that big time upside. In the first game of the season, 56 rushing yards and a touchdown. And then it kind of just fell off. He wasn't rushing as much, wasn't being as effective with his legs, and the wheels fell off. I think there's a chance they're just like, heck, just go. Let's just figure it out. Let him run a little bit. Maybe he grew a little bit in the last couple weeks, just studying behind Flacco. So I'm a little interested, and if I'm stacking him, it is Alec Pierce and only Alec Pierce. Jameis Winston, we just talked about it being one of the faster games of the week. 7,200. I'm very intrigued against the Saints defense that hasn't really been able to stop anybody. 41 passes versus Baltimore, 46 versus the Chargers. If this is another spot where he's throwing the ball over 40 times, there is a path to 30-plus fantasy points, and you have stacking partners that aren't very expensive. So I'm very interested in some Jameis. You could have Kamara coming back or Taysom Hill. There's a couple people you can have coming on the way back if you want. Geno Smith, I talked about Purdy. I think with DK Metcalf back, we've seen the Seahawks be willing to just air it out. And I think there's a path to them doing it this week. If they get down, 10, 14 points quick, Geno's just going to be firing the ball. And we've seen him have 56 pass attempts, 40 pass attempts. So we know that outcome is a possibility. And versus, an offense like the 49ers, you very well could have to do that. Earlier in the year, he had 52 pass attempts against the 49ers. So it's absolutely a path that, we could go down there. And then lastly, Kirk Cousins. This Broncos team has had several games where they've been able to go 25 plus points. If they're able to push the Falcons at all, Cousins starts to look a little bit interesting. The Broncos have fallen off a little bit in their pass protection. It's still not the easiest matchup, but 7,100 is kind of cheap for the upside that he has. On to DraftKings. Anthony Richardson's the highest owned. Winston is next. Russell Wilson after that. We talked about all three of those. We didn't talk about Jared Goff, but we probably should. Look, they're 14-point favorites, and he hasn't had to throw the ball very many times at all. Look, versus Tennessee, they won by almost 40. He threw the ball 15 times. Versus Dallas, 25 times. They won by almost 40. This is another game script that could go like that, where they're up huge and just not having to throw. Now, they got to score the points to be able to take Goff off the field early and all that stuff. So there's going to be points, but does it come from Goff or does it come from the running game? What we've seen from this Lions team is they are fully willing to just run the ball down somebody's throat. And that's what I expect they do against the Jaguars. I just don't think they're going to have to pass very much. That's my worry. That's why I'm kind of out on Goff. But if he can be super efficient, get 4 touchdowns in the first half, then, there is a path to him being successful, and he's going to go lower owned there. You have a smaller target tree because no Sam Laporta. So, Williams, Amon-Ra, Gibbs, all are a little bit interesting in that spot. And the best QB matchups, Russell, Richardson, Will Levis, Aaron Rodgers, Bo Nix. Pretty much talked about them all, except for Tua. Tua's in a great spot too, but I don't love that spot quite as much. Getting over to running back, our high-owned running back, Alvin Kamara, 34% owned. He's going to be high-owned. It's just comes with a giant workload. We've seen it week in and week out. Once again, Jamal Williams is out. Mims is the backup and just getting very little. Taysom Hill will take a couple carries as well, but as it breaks down, it's the Kamara show, and he's going to have a big workload. He's in an okay spot. It's a fast game. If the Browns get to a lead, Kamara could be used more in the passing game, and that just gives his ceiling such a bigger outcome. The one worry here is the Saints. Kamara has not scored a TD since week 6. But he's still putting up fantasy-worthy scores, but he has to get in the end zone to really be had to have it. Versus Carolina, he was almost a had to have it. 25 points right there. Had he scored a touchdown at his price, then he would have had to have it at 8,800. But without that, you didn't really need to do it. That's my one worry, is he's super expensive, and the offense hasn't been scoring that many tutties. J.K. Dobbins, I am personally not really feeling it. Bengals have been tough versus the run. Dobbins has fallen off, and Edwards is back and taking some of his workload, so I'm not really trying to go there. Nick Chubb, we talked about it a little bit on the preview show. He has just been highly inefficient, so I do worry about Chubb. It's a great spot, though. Now, could he get loose and break one? Absolutely. I think if Chubb is super high owned and there's some and there's that inefficiency that we've seen, I might just lean into that inefficiency and not play him quite as much. I really worry about that. I just don't. And plus, this offense has been throwing the ball 40 plus times. I mean, does that change in a better game script? Maybe. But I I just have a hard time for seeing him still working back from this injury, being inefficient, coming out with 102 touchdowns. He's touchdown yardage back only, and he needs to do something like that to really be needed, and I just don't see it. CMC 9,800. I mean, he's been good versus the Seahawks in the past. He had a huge workload last time. I'm fine going here. There's huge upside with him, obviously. Chase Brown, 11% owned versus the Chargers. I don't mind it. The workload's been giant, and he's been used a ton in both the passing game and the running game. So I think he is probably going a little under-owned for his workload. Then we got to talk about Kyren Williams here. So Kyren hasn't scored in the last 2 games. Before that, he was just automatic touchdown. And this is a great spot for him versus the Patriots. Very interested in some Kyren. There is a 2 touchdown, upside in this spot. So I don't mind going some Kyren. Kenneth Walker, the San Francisco game is one we're targeting. It very well could be not all through the air. He had only 14 for 32 on the ground last time, but 8 for 37 and a touchdown through the air. So he's used, all over the field. The usage is high. There's definitely path to success, but it is not the easiest matchup for the 49ers. Derrick Henry. One thing that I want to point out is the Steelers been allowing 1.5 touchdowns to the running back over the last 4 weeks. Now you got D. Henry there. So the chance of him getting 1 or 2 touchdowns is very, very likely. He gets 2 touchdowns and then a yardage bonus, and it's a you need to have him type week. Also, if you're doing a Steelers stack, Henry is a great bring back there. So I like Henry. Definitely going to be playing him, but probably more so in Steelers type stacks than just, random one-offs. Because if this game doesn't go off, then I don't know if Derrick Henry gets there. All right, Jamar Gibbs, David Montgomery, one of them is going to have to get there. Huge favorites. I don't see how the Jags with Mac Jones and hurt wide receivers are able to keep up with this Lions team. Now, the issue here is, do they get out to such a big lead that Montgomery or Gibbs don't get that fourth quarter, run the game out work? I think it's possible. They could bring out Craig Reynolds a little bit early, but most likely one or both of these running backs are going to get it done. The issue is that Montgomery's priced a little bit high. Can he get 2 touchdowns? Absolutely. He's done it before, but he's maxed at 20 fantasy points this season, so it is a little hard to get there. Gibbs has a little more upside, a little more wiggle, a little easier for him to get yards. I definitely like him. He's only 200 more, and there's definitely path to success for both of these guys. I would probably only play one of the 2 in a single lineup on this big of a slate, but I'm definitely interested in this running game. And optimizers aren't really going to be pushing it because the work is just split. It's really hard for like an optimizer or a projection system to like both of these guys with a split workload, but the range of outcomes for them is huge. One guy could have 30, the other could have 15 or 10 or whatever, but there's going to be a lot of points to be had on the ground versus the Jaguars. They're allowing 120 yards a game to the running back and 0.8 touchdowns. Kareem Hunt, 8K. The workload's big. They're going to try and keep the ball on the ground versus the Bills. Bills have been very good outside to the wide receivers. So I think the easiest way to attack this Bills defense is on the ground and through Travis Kelce or dump offs to Kareem Hunt. And Kareem Hunt had 10 targets last week. So I think Hunt is an interesting way. Bills are allowing 0.5 touchdowns, allowing 44 yards a game to the receiver, 85 rushing yards. They've been better to the running back lately. They started off really bad, but I think Kareem Hunt is in an interesting spot. Don't mind taking some of him. Running back on DraftKings, we got CMC, Devon Achane. Wait, I didn't talk about Achane. He wasn't a high-owned on... Oh, I skipped him on accident. This is one of my favorite plays of the week, Devon Achane. He is just electric and giant target volume with Tua as quarterback. So we already know he's hyper efficient. He can break a long one from anywhere on the field. And now we have consistent workload and volume. I think I'm going to be playing an absolute ton of him. I love this spot for him. Kyren, Hyon, Gibbs, Henry, all of them we like. Pretty much this week on DraftKings, I don't know if I would be getting too different at running back. I think there's plenty of places to get different elsewhere, and these studs are in really good spots. Audric Estime, 4,500 is a little bit interesting. He's cheap. He had 14 carries last week. Jamal Williams only had a couple. They've said that Estime is going to continue to get more reps. Think it's an interesting spot to just, take a shot if you need a value play. I don't love it, but there is a path to his success. All right, on to the wide receivers. High-owned Jerry Jeudy. He's in a great spot, 5,800. Him, Tillman, Eli Moore all have very similar average depth of targets or air yards, similar target share, all that. It's just Tillman has had the variance go his way. Jerry Jeudy's in a good spot too. Don't mind Jerry Jeudy. Don't mind Eli. Don't mind Cedric Tillman. I think that game is interesting, and Winston stacks are interesting. Jacoby Myers, 6,200. If Miami gets it going and they're only throwing the ball, Myers or Bowers likely have a good game. Take your pick which one. Calvin Ridley, 6,400. They're going to have to throw all game long, and Minnesota hasn't been great versus receivers, so it makes some sense to want to go to Calvin Ridley. Also, post D-Hop. He has 143 yards and 10 receptions, then 5 receptions for 73, then 5 receptions for 84 and 2 touchdowns. He's heavily involved. He's been getting it done as the only option. Ladd McConkey, 6,400. Personally, I rather Johnston or Palmer this week, but I'm fine having a little bit of McConkey. Cincinnati has just been very good to the slot receiver. Rashad Bateman, 5,400. I think he's going a little over-owned at this spot, but I do have interest in him as a downfield threat in a game that I'm interested in. So I'm fine having a little bit. Khalil Shakir, with no Kincaid there, the middle is open a little bit more. I'm a little interested in Shakir in this spot. My worry here is I just don't know if he really has that much ceiling. And so I don't feel like he's really a must-own. Probably the only way I'm really playing him is in Allen stacks. And even that, if Cooper plays, I'd rather have Cooper. George Pickens. Love me some George Pickens this week. It is an absolute great spot versus Baltimore. We know he can go nuts. He has that profile that he can go for 150 and 2. Absolutely interested in some George Pickens, and he's been good with Russell Wilson. So give me some of that. Some pivots. Cedric Tillman, keep riding the hot hand. Man has 14, 25, and 17 fantasy points since Cooper got traded. He's in a good spot versus the Saints. Why not? Cortland Sutton versus the Falcons. Sutton's been on a roll. 8 for 100, 7 for 122, 6 for 70 and a tutty. He gets over 100 and touchdown, you pretty much need to have him, and there's absolutely a path to that versus the Falcons. Tyreek Hill. All right. I gotta bring up Tyreek. We gotta talk about Tyreek in this spot. So it's a wrist injury, but he's not getting targets. 4 targets last week, 5 the week before. 9, he's only averaging 6.6 targets for the season. You look at his drops, he only has 1 drop on the year. His drop rate this year is less than last year, and it's a wrist injury. So that's where I thought I would see some injuries. some issues. Maybe they're just not drawing plays up for him because of the injury, but the dude can get open. The wrist isn't keeping him from getting open. He has the wheels. I am a little interested if nobody is going to go to Tyreek in a good spot versus the Raiders. Do I absolutely love it? No. It's scary, but there is a ceiling here, and he is one of the few players on the slate that can go for 30 plus. And in a week where I think there's very few that could go for 30 plus, it makes it a little bit more interesting to go with some Tyreek. But it's a scary spot, scary play. Don't mind having some, though. Quentin Johnson, he's your deep threat. And him and Herbert have linked up on a couple times for some big games. Bengals are better through the middle than they are deep. So the slot, it's harder for. Johnston or Palmer are, my favorites if you want to try and pick on them. Alec Pierce, look, Richardson's back. The deep ball's back. I'm absolutely willing to take some shots on Alec Pierce. Huge ceiling for a cheap price. And if I'm stacking AR, I'm definitely going to have him with me. Garrett Wilson, fine throwing in some Garrett Wilson. He's been studly since Adams is back. Jameis Williams is probably my favorite pass catcher on the Lions in this spot with no Laporta. I think that there could be another target or two for him, and he is so explosive, he can really get it done. So very interested in that path. Elijah Moore, we talked about. Deebo Samuel. Only thing I want to talk about Deebo is what he has done to Seattle. So he had 19 earlier this year. Last year he had 31 and 19. The year before he had 26 and 12. The year before that he had 32. He's crushed the Seahawks, and I got to keep that train moving. I am absolutely fine playing some Deebo when he has been that good versus the Seahawks. Bringbacks for Seattle or for Deebo. JSN feels a little chasey after he just had that huge target share and a huge game, but 49ers can get beat through the slot, so a little interested there. NDK Metcalf is back and off the injury report, so absolutely considering him. He had 11 targets versus them last time, so I like that. Amari Cooper is my favorite Allen combo. If he plays, we need to watch that news, though. And then Steelers, Kevin Austin, 5,200. Mike Williams, 5,700. We don't know the role Williams is going to have yet. He barely played last time. But Wilson's a very good deep thrower, and Williams can get the ball deep. He only played like 8% of the snaps last game, but had a target, a reception, and a touchdown. So if that goes to show you there could be some future rapport, I like it. Also, he had very limited time to gel with that Steelers team and still played. I expect the snap rate to jump up maybe 45-50% this week. I don't know if he'll go over that, but it's at least of interest. And Calvin Austin, he's going to continue being the 3, the snap guy, a deep threat. He can score from anywhere on the field, so definitely a little interested in him. If that game goes wild, he's going to be he could partly be a reason for it. On to DraftKings. Cedric Tillman, we talked about him, way too cheap on DraftKings. Keyshawn Abute for 3,500, 25% owned. All right, he is too cheap on FanDuel. I don't mind going to we see some continued targets going his way. 6, 6, 6. He's had some success. May likes him. He's a target a little more down the field. It's versus the Rams defense. I'm fine having some. 3,500 is cheap. It's just you're going to eat some chalk to do it. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 8K. He's too high a price for his role right now. This Lions team is too good. They don't have to go to him. I think a ceiling play is out of the question here. Something very fluky would need to happen for the Jaguar or for Amon-Ra to have a ceiling play in this game. I think most likely outcome, he gets 6 to 8 targets, maybe gets a touchdown, gets 60, 70 yards, and they just don't really have to use him. He does fine, but isn't necessary to win a GPP. And let's get over to tight end before defense to close it out quickly. Jonnu Smith, Travis Kelce, Will Dissly. I'm out on Jonnu in this game. I don't really want to go there. If you want a little bit, fine. Travis Kelce, I'm very interested in. 20, 15, and 16, his last 3 games, heavily involved in the target department. And now they're facing the Bills, who are very good versus the wide receiver. I think the most likely outcome is another big target game from Kelce. So absolutely interested in him. Next, Brock Bowers. I talked about Jacoby Myers. If the Dolphins score some points, they're going to be throwing. And it literally just goes to Bowers or Myers. So one of them is probably going to have a game. I like Bowers. I like Myers. Don't mind either of them. All right, pivots. Kyle Pitts. So on the season, the Broncos been good versus the running back and the wide receiver. Opens things up for Kyle Pitts. For slot receivers, I think Pitts is in an interesting spot, and he is one of the only tight ends that is continually getting 50-plus yards. I think there's a floor. There's a ceiling with him. I like that play at low ownership. Brock Wright, 4,600 and probably under 3K on DraftKings versus the Jags. Jags have been absolutely terrible to tight end. There's no Sam Laporta. Brock Wright has been used near the end zone. He had games earlier this year of 5 targets. I don't mind a little bit of Brock Wright in the absence of Sam Laporta. Only thing here is that, it's hard to really stack around him. I do most of the time have some sort of stack with a tight end. Maybe you go tight end and Gibbs or Montgomery and just do a 2-man leaving Goff out. I think that's something that is probably has a decent rate of hitting. Brock Wright gets a touchdown. The running backs are also likely scoring. Evan Ingram, 5,900. Target share has been huge since Kirk is out, so I don't mind going back to that. Lions have been good versus tight end, but they're going to have to throw, and Ingram's there to catch the ball. So he's an interesting one for me. Tight end on DraftKings. Smith, Hunter Henry. I don't mind some Hunter Henry. We got a 5-star alert score for him. Rams are 24th versus tight end. May is probably going to have to throw it a little bit in this matchup, so don't mind that whatsoever. And then Brock Bowers, we talked about, that would be one of my favorite. And Travis Kelce going low owned is wild to me. And let us close it out with some defense here. All right, so our high owned defense, we got Green Bay Packers, the Jets, and the 49ers. I don't love the 49er one. The Seahawks offense has been solid this year. Jets haven't been good, but it is Anthony Richardson, so there is a little bit of a path there. Don't mind that. Packers, solid D versus the Bears, who have been a mess. And even though they fired their OC, you have like 2 or 3 practices to turn it around. It's not likely to happen that quick. Definitely some changes could happen, so the Bears are a better offense, but it looked real ugly before Waldron got canned. Pivot-wise, Detroit Lions, they're going to be forcing the Jags and Mac Jones to sling the ball all over the place. I mean, that just breeds sacks, breeds interceptions, turnovers, and potential pick sixes. So interested in the Lions. And then Minnesota, very similar spot. We were picking on Will Levis earlier in the year, and the Vikings have been one of the best, if not the best, fantasy defense. So why would you not want to go there? It is paying up to get different there, but we do have some value, so you can probably afford it. Then on to DraftKings, we got Packers, Titans, Lions as the 3 high owned. I'm in on the Lions, not so much the Titans versus Minnesota. And the cheap defenses, Jags, Titans, Seahawks, maybe Raiders. Miami just hasn't been that great of an offense this year. They're 2,400, but it's a tough click, All right, guys. And then also maybe the Browns, 2,600 versus the Saints. They don't have any more wide receivers. If that deep ball is not working, then that offense kind of falls apart. All right, guys, that'll do it for us today. Good luck. Let's make some money. I'll see you guys next week. Peace.